Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? New microphone. I am on the highway and I'm driving in a storm. So I think this is a good test to see how the noise cancellation works on this thing, the noise reduction, I guess. First off, rest in peace to Akira Toriyama, the Japanese illustrator who was credited with creating famous properties like Chrono Trigger, which I've never watched or read, and Dragon Ball, which I have watched a fair amount of, and it was a very influential anime in my teens. I started drawing like him, trying to emulate his style and learn from his focus on anatomy and drapery and other things that I wasn't good at the time. Seems like anybody I knew in an art class or who was just a casual illustrator was trying to draw Goku and all the other Z fighters at the time. So rest in peace to him. Without really meaning to, it's not like I set out to deliberately do this, but I've noticed over the last couple of years that I've been reading a lot of more Japanese texts, probably for the last 4 or 5 years. I read Sun and Steel by Mishima. I've read the Book of the Five Rings. I've got general impressions of them, but I don't remember specifics from them. They're the kind of things that I would want to read more in detail, especially in print. I would like to read Nitobe's Bushido book. It's been fascinating to get kind of a 30,000 foot view of Bushido and how it's sort of a Japanese counterpart to Western chivalry, but not really. That's an idea that I would need to refine a little bit more to explain it. I'm going to read Musashi, and I also am definitely going to read Shogun. I don't know if I'll get to the entire Clavel Asian saga, but Shogun is on the list for this year. But yesterday I finished an incredible book. It was a piece of nonfiction by a Japanese author. It made my best of year list. I talked about this on Wednesday. It was called No Surrender by Hiroo Onoda. This was the man who fought for the Japanese army during World War II. He was stationed in the Philippines, and he refused to believe that the war was over. And he stayed on post and stayed disciplined for 29 years. For most of that time, he had other companions with him. I can't remember their names off the top of my head. I did the audiobook, and so I didn't see these names to get their impressions kind of stuck in my brain. One of the men, he was there for part of it, and then there was another man who was kind of Onoda's best friend for 18 years. And then when they got ambushed by villagers, he took a gunshot that ended up claiming his life. Onoda was alone when he was found. In the book, he explains his early life, his upbringing, his enlistment in the military, his drive for discipline and for honor and for all that stuff, and the very particular set of orders that said you cannot surrender and you cannot delete yourself. You have to stay on post. It's your job to take this island for the glory of the empire. I thought the most fascinating part of it was going to be like, how did he not know the war was over? Was this just some forgotten island, and in the chaos of the aftermath of it, the military lost track of this dude and he just stayed on post, and he kind of came back to the world 30 years later when somebody else set foot on the island and told him like, oh no, it wasn't that. He heard right around the time that the war ended that it was over, but he thought that was American propaganda. He didn't believe that Japan would surrender. In fact, he thought that it could only be defeated if it was destroyed, and since it wasn't destroyed, the rest just must be a trick to try to, by the Americans to try to get Onoda and his men to come out of hiding on this Philippine island. And so they stayed moving. He and his friends were constantly on the move. He talks about how they slept, what their grooming and bathing rituals were, how they kept track of time, how they dealt with bee stings and stuff, the difficulty of hunger and having to ration what meager supplies they did, the kind of food they lived off of, how they prepared it. And they were just constantly moving because this island was occupied by Filipino villagers. And so they not only did they have to constantly stay on the move, but they had to be careful about leaving no sign behind them. They were eventually able to steal a radio. He talks about how they preserved it, how they preserved batteries. I mean, these are people that for whom something as simple as a copper wire, which you can just run down to the hardware store and buy, was a treasure. They would protect it and take care of it for years because resources were so scant for these two Japanese soldiers hiding out on this decently sized island. I kind of want to look up which island it was and get a view of the maps of it and stuff. He talked about how there was no such thing as an empty valley with a river in it. If there was a valley, there was a road. They had to be careful of valleys, so they were constantly living on mountains. They got bit by ants, scorpions, bit by centipedes, stingers and stuff. They had to watch their malnutrition. They had to examine their stool after they went to the bathroom to compare it to, okay, well, this is what I ate yesterday versus how hard I worked, and if this is what it looks like, then I might be dehydrated, I might be missing essential nutrients. It's mind-bending the amount of detail that he paid attention to while he was there so that he could stay on post and stay committed to this idea. And he even remarked a couple of times in the memoir, which he wrote after he was found and finally surrendered. He talks about, in a very self-aware way, the ways that he would convince himself that the war was continuing on. They would steal newspapers, they would listen to radio reports, and he and his buddies were like, nah, no, it can't be over, this must all be some trick. It's a very clever trick, but it's a trick nonetheless. Even when the Japanese government found family members of his, siblings and stuff, and had them write messages, send photos, make broadcasts over the radio, he would still find little tiny things in there. It's like, no, he didn't look like this, or he wouldn't say something like this, or his handwriting's different. He would convince himself that it was a trick, and that's what kept him on post for 29 years. This book is full of nuggets of wisdom in between the compelling facts about how he managed to just carry out his duty for 29 years. He went into the jungle at 23 and he came out at 52. That's got to be, man, like, can you even fathom that? Because I can't. I can see why Werner Herzog wanted to interview this man while he was still alive. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 91. This memoir was written and published in 1974, so I don't know what he did with his life for the next 40 years after that. Presumably he lived a full one, but I mean, just imagine you're still obviously, culturally and ethnically Japanese at that point, but when you've been living with just your friend in the jungles of the Philippines for 3/5 of your life, how hard must it be to come back and integrate to not only a post-war Japan, but like a post-war Japan? How different was Japan in the 70s from the 40s when he went in? It's stuff that boggles the mind, and you can get little snippets and tastes of it. He's got this very strong sense of self-awareness that comes through in the memoir as he reflects on his mindset while he was there versus the things that he's come to grips with after the fact. It's just incredible. I'm going to get a print copy of this one for my library, and like I said, it's on the best of year list. It's just fantastic. So I highly recommend you go read a copy of No Surrender by Hiroo Onoda. Content warning, there's not really any language that stuck out to me. No excessively detailed descriptions of violence, even though it is a war memoir, and no sensual scenes or anything like that. This is just about what compelled this man to stay on post for 29 years and how he did it. So go check it out. Thanks for watching. Check the description for relevant links, and you can find my books on Amazon. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.